we make these hierarchies, and they're hierarchies that are devoted towards a goal, and that the sum total of all those hierarchies is something like the patriarchy. Even though I hate that word, and I don't think anybody should use it. I don't like that word at all. But that's we're speaking within the confines of that theory.
Just defining how you're using it. What do you mean by the patriarchy?
Well, the patriarchy is the sum total of all Western hierarchies. Let's say it's the radical leftist vision of the sum total of all Western hierarchies.
But it's always male.
Well, that's the theory, is that it's male dominated, and
patriarchy is a male-dominated word.
Well, and it's a funny thing because, of course, there's lots of sub-elements of the patriarchy that aren't male-dominated. So healthcare, for example, universities, the education system in general, there's lots of places where these sub-elements are female-dominated.
But so do you think that they're defined as the patriarchy? Do they define healthcare?
Well, it's a good question, Joe. I don't know what happens. If you have a sub-element of the patriarchy that's dominated by women, is that still the patriarchy? It's like the structure's still intact. It's still performing the same function. Well, now the women are running it. Well, is that the patriarchy? And the answer to that is, well, we're all vague about what the definition is, so we don't need to address that issue.
Well, here's
That's
some
the
clear
answer.
ones. Here's some clear ones, right? Like major corporations, the vast majority of CEOs are male.
Yeah.
We think of that as part of the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Government.
Yeah.
Never been a female president. Vast majority of senators, congressmen, etc., male.
Yeah, so I guess we could say, well, the patriarchy is all those elements of hierarchical structure that are still dominated by men.
Law enforcement, military, male, mostly male.
Right, but it's a peculiar definition.
Right.
Because it means you have to fractionate the patriarchy into pieces. You can no longer talk about it as a uniform structure. If you're going to take out all those pieces that are dominated by women, say, well, that's not the patriarchy. But the thing is that the whole concept is so ill-defined that it begars description.
But it's always power, though, right? I mean,
that's the other thing. That's the claim. The other claim is that all hierarchies are predicated on power, which is a claim that's absolutely appalling. It's like plumbers. Are they part of the hierarchy? You've got roaming bands of armed, aggressive, tyrannical plumbers coming to your door saying, use our service or else. Like, that's not how it works. You go look, when you're going looking for a plumber, you go look for a massage therapist, or a surgeon for that matter, or a lawyer. You go look for the person who's most competent. And one of the things the left can't tolerate is the idea that hierarchies are predicated, in part even, on competence, which they clearly are. The best predictors for success in Western hierarchies are intelligence and conscientiousness. Those are the best psychological predictors of success. They only account for about a third of the variation in success. Maybe a third is probably about right. So there's still lots of room for randomness and even for systemic discrimination. But the notion that our systems aren't predicated in part on competence is clearly wrong. Now, you asked a question about the left. It's like, well, why are the left always on the side of the people who don't fit in, let's say, or don't fit so easily in? And I think that is a matter of the consequence of hierarchical structures. So imagine in every hierarchy there's some people who don't do very well in any given hierarchy. Then imagine across all the hierarchies that there's a subset of people who are very likely to not do well in any of them. So you might say, well, they're systemically discriminated against. The left would be on their side because they're on the side, even temperamentally, of the people who are dispossessed. And the thing about that is that it's valid. Look, we need a spokesperson politically for the dispossessed. That's what the Democratic Party used to do when they worked for the working class. Is the working class needed a political voice. It's like, okay, that's the Democrats. Well, why do they need a political voice? Well, to keep the hierarchy from degenerating into rigid tyranny. It's part of the political discussion. But now the problem is this is the problem with the left, is that, well, what's the hierarchy? It's a tyrannical patriarchy. It's like, no, it's not. It's partly corrupt, like every system. But it's less corrupt than most systems, and there's a lot of elements of it that are devoted towards self-improvement and self-monitoring. You have to be a little nuanced and subtle about these sorts of things. And you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the leftist rhetoric has got so intense that the idea is, and people believe this, well, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Everything is getting worse in all possible ways, and there's systemic racism everywhere, and it's utterly unfair, and it should be torn down and rebuilt. It's like, no. It's actually functioning unbelievably well, even though it still has its problems.